Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, does the team go as the QB goes? We investigate and we take a look at the weight of lofty expectations on the shoulders of Micah Hudson next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you. Looking ahead to kickoff Saturday night from Jones Stadium as the Red Raiders host Abilene Christian. We heard some thoughts yesterday from Tech head coach Joey McGuire on a variety of subjects. And today we'll zero in on the offensive side of the football and take a listen to some thoughts from OC Zach Kittley. Offense, always a popular topic of conversation in West Texas whenever the fall arrives. And I think his group, not to mention the high historical standards, his group facing a task of kind of rising back and restoring that standard. And a lot of that this time around, Chris, we hope is not just pie in the sky stuff because of some of the personnel additions and some of what you've had going on throughout the offseason as far as a talent infusion. A lot of that having to do with some pass catchers, both of the wide receiver and tight end variety. But one thing I was really interested to hear Coach Kittley talk about this week was how even with all those exciting bells and whistles, the season and the team seem to continue to run through the quarterbacks. Here's Coach Kittley.
I'm the quarterbacks. The team goes as we go. I'm a firm believer in that. I mean, you go look at college football, high school football, National Football League, whatever it is. If you're doing a really good job at the quarterback position, you got a lot of chance to win some games. So between the O-line and the quarterback, I think that's definitely the two big pieces of the puzzle for us.
And of course, Chris, it seems like over the last couple of years, you can hardly get the conversation started as a team because there's always been this issue with the quarterback. And sometimes early on in the season, where you never feel like you kind of left the station, right? At least in the way you wanted to.
Yeah, it goes back to like what Joey was talking about. Like, hey, what's the key to the season, man? Give me all the keys. And he's like, QB health, QB health, QB health. And I, as we're seeing, there's some lists that have come out. Everybody in this league has somebody that I think they feel good about at quarterback. Maybe not necessarily Arizona State or Cincinnati. There's a few schools that are kind of not super, over the moon excited about who their quarterback is. But really, you just look at the long list of everybody knows clear cut who the starter is. There was very few QB races. And Barron is showing up on some of these lists at 10, 11 out of 16. And in a way, that's fair. He hasn't played a full season healthy, but I'm interested to see what it does look like if you get a full year of him, because I think that list could look very different a year from now if he has the kind of year that we would think, again, if he's available and healthy. He's the tone setter. I mean, I think that this is going to be an interesting Saturday for Barron as much as anybody, because this is the first time he's really had the reins and gone into a year where he's been the guy. Every other time he's been here, there's been a lot of signal callers, and he's kind of always thought to be, hey, he's the future. He's going to be in the mix at some point. This will be his job at some point. Well, no, that time is now. And he appears by all accounts to be 100% healthy. And I think people are now looking to him. How does he handle that? I think he's going to handle it very, very well. I think you could tell he's matured and has grown into this. He's certainly paid his dues. He has played a ton, but not as much as you would think. So that's kind of a tricky deal. Certainly hasn't practiced as much as you would think either. But he's going to set the tone, because at some point, Cal, we can get into how deep you are in defense or the offensive skill may be better. At some point, it's going to be 3rd and 8, and the game's going to be on the line, and he's going to have to deliver. That's the job. He's going to have to check in or out of a play that when the game is on the line, that's going to decide it. and that's the beauty of the position, because he can kind of steer this ship differently than almost anybody else can. And you have to be the get over the hump guy at times and drag your team along and make a play when there's not one there, and all those things. And yeah, he's got more help that'll be able to do that, but at some point he's going to have to deliver. And I'm glad I have a front row seat to see if he can do that, because I strongly believe that he will. But yeah, he's going to set the tone for this deal for sure. And maybe you see a deep ball here or there early, just to let everybody know, hey, it's kind of like in yesterday's show when I was talking to you about some coaches like run a fake in game one.
Yeah.
Just to say hello. And, you may see Barron throw one really deep just to let everybody know I'm good to go. You better not play press coverage, or you better not do this or that, because I'm back and I can stretch the field if needed. And now I've got the guys that can help me do that.
Yeah, it's like a guy stepping into the lion cage and cracking the whip right off the bat to let them know, I'm the ringmaster, boys. I'm the ringmaster. Look to me. I got to tell you, though, I am frustrated greatly. I'm talking major vexation that the injury storyline, unfortunately, has been the biggest part of, I think, his storyline so far. And it's always frustrating when that's the case, because you want to just talk about football and what can be done or what hasn't been done, what has been done. But, Chris, you want to talk about a train that hadn't left the station, and how many railroad euphemisms can a man use in a 30-minute podcast? Stick around to find out. But that's the way I feel about him individually, because I loved what I saw the first time we saw him trot out. And I don't mean the first time, but first time in a situation, I'm not sure that was the first or not, but in a situation where you felt like, man, the wheel's in his hand following a Tyler Shuck injury in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And I liked what I saw. I was thinking, well, I guess maybe the Shuck era could be over. Of course, that was foolish, naive, all the things you want to label me as, all the things you're thinking. Yes, those are accurate, because little did I know the door would continue to revolve for a good while longer as far as the QB spot goes. But when he has been, for a moment or a short window, it feels like, healthy, I've been excited by what he's been able to do, but just have never really been able to see those weeks stacked up and him given a chance to grow over a season. So you think it's unfair to say that the injury aspect is the biggest part of his storyline? Am I making too much of it? Or is he got a label right now that's kind of first based in stay healthy and play a season and stay on the field? What do you make of that?
I think it would be unfair not to mention it with what we've seen from him, because I think that's just, context is important. And he just, whether it's high ankle sprain 2 years ago, which he battled through multiple.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the last game that we saw him play when he was mostly healthy, and it was almost a full half in Stillwater 2 years ago. And I believe that day, even that he dealt with that ankle sprain in the entire second half, because it happened right at the end of the first half. What did he throw for? 340, 335? And I remember Mike Gundy going, hey, folks, this kid's going to be a problem for the rest of this league for many, many years. And but really since then, it's always been a bit compromised because of that. He dealt with that ankle the rest of that year. And then this past year, the shoulder is 100% of the, except for a handful of drives at West Virginia before he got dinged up. But that was, I think it was maybe 2 drives where he was totally normal. And keep in mind, wet and all that business. But then he takes the shot in the second quarter, and then we dealt with it all the way through the bowl game. And we're dealing with it in the spring. So I think it's important if you don't mention it as much as anything. But yeah, that's so I get I get some kind of pointing to him and not saying he's amongst this or that. As far as that's fair, it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And if he can remain healthy, I think that people will really like what they see, especially so now that he's got help around him.
Yes, I want to believe. Yeah. We just got to have a chance to see it. And man, I think you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't necessarily think when you're talking about there at the end, some help around him, that you are talking directly about a QB2, but I'd like to throw him in that category as well, because Cam Brown is one of the guys that I'm most intrigued to see, impact the offense and what he can do for a ball game, and maybe especially some situational football. and obviously in what way that may aid Baron Morton himself.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see more and more of the Cam Brown scenario around college football. I think that many coaches have, I don't want to say adopted, but are adding this into their bag of tricks. Adding a Donovan Smith component to what they do on offense. And because I don't think Zach is alone in kind of the thought process here. And what I mean by this is not just a traditional backup QB, but let's give a completely different look to the offense, and let's include it in an every game basis. And I just think that you're going to start to see this happen a bit more and a bit more. And I'm excited about it. The one thing that I'm interested in this part is that, do you just want to tell? It's almost a tell whenever this other one comes in, and you're almost telling the defense, okay, well, we're shifting to the other playbook now, so you need to, and that's what you necessarily don't want. But that, in some ways, the QB run stuff is such a pain to stop that. I think Texas Tech probably knew what was coming with Avery Johnson last year and couldn't do anything to stop it. He had 5 rushing touchdowns in the second half.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There doesn't have to be a total catch you off guard or mystery component to that, particular aspect of what we feel like Brown can do. It's kind of like hat on hat, move this guy out of the way, this man move that man. And oftentimes it's really successful. I'll be danged, even in 2024, really successful.
If you block it up and you have an athlete that's out there in space that can, with some wiggle to him or some, and I think they feel like that Cam Brown does. So, and I said this yesterday, but you're going to show some of this just to say hello to Washington State.
Yeah.
I think. I just Makes think sense. That's what, because, Zach kind of alluded to that when he was touching on some of what everybody would see, and he just kind of alluded to that. And I think there's a multitude of reasons for that. But yeah, man. And I don't know if we'll see much of him this year, but boy, you can just tell that there is a lot of positivity about a guy named Will Hammond. He has come in, I think, footwork, studies, just wired the right way. I just think he's really, really made some headway here. Being an early enrollee, is added a bunch of weight, changed his body, and all those things. So I think Texas Tech is in pretty good hands here with Signal Caller. Whereas you thought this was the case last year, and then all of a sudden you look up and go, Jake Strong's having to start on a Saturday night in Provo, and this is it. This is like we don't really have another option that is on scholarship anyway. We've real gadgety with, but so anyway, it's pretty nice to have, and then because Jake is still amongst the group now, so you've got more insurance there and more capable bodies.
Some of what you referenced that night in Provo, in addition to the season overall, contains some of what I want to get into next: the need to adapt. And obviously roll with the punches, as Texas Tech had to do that throughout the year. And we also had a thought from offensive coordinator Zach Kittley on sort of that saying of having a plan, get hit in the mouth, then what's the response, what the experience was like last year. And I kind of wonder if maybe they take some things away from that, though unintended whenever the year started, that could be applied to 2024. Let's take a listen again to offensive coordinator Zach Kittley. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app, where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and America's #1 sportsbook is shaking it up to kick off football season with an offer a football fan can't afford to miss. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And, of course, you can cancel at any time. Again, from right now through September 22nd, bet $5 and take advantage of a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Let's take a listen again to offensive coordinator Zach Kittley.
You got to adapt. You know what I mean? Last year, if you'd have came and told me before the year that Taj Brooks runs for 1,500 yards and you're playing 3 quarterbacks and some of those things, I would have not believed you. And so, I think that's one thing I've taken away is you got to be adaptable, and you've got to do some things that you may not be comfortable with or maybe that you've never done before. We were doing some stuff in the run game that I never dreamed of doing, and we're studying some people that we've never done before because, when you're going into a week with a quarterback that doesn't practice and you have one of the best running backs in the country, you're trying to find a way to win a football game. And again, that can be 17-14 or maybe a shootout. So whatever it takes to win, I think that's the biggest thing, which I like to think I've always been that way because the team's always bigger than the individual success, and at the end of the day, really what matters is getting that dub at the end of the day. So but that's been the biggest thing, is be adaptable.
One of those things, Chris, I feel like we've kind of seen under his tenure more so than we did in some prior eras where you have won a variety of games. There have been some shootouts, there have been some low scoring affairs. And you found some ways to be successful in both.
Yeah, and I think Zach has tried to tell everybody really since he got here, I don't care if we're winning 10-9 or 48-47. It's just a matter of did we score more than the opposition. And I think, the 2 years ago, to your point, it was 1 week it was at Iowa State in Ames with 0 degrees, 14-10. Then you come back and beat Oklahoma in a shootout where both teams, I think, were in the 40s. And it was all, out there I think these days with the era that we're in with the portal and all those things, I think versatility is what everybody has to major in. I think you've got to be able to it's harder to have a true identity and always have that with so much change. I think your culture is a bit trickier where guys are just in a program for many, many years and they're just kind of growing toward this is how we do things. And when it's NFL teams do this all the time based on what the draft dictates or who they sign in free agency, they may have to showcase this or that aspect on what they are from year to year. Not every team necessarily just stays the same. Yeah, there's some core principles, but I think versatility is king in college football these days. And I think that's why I think that, you're not going to just try to run Taj into the ground this year. You've got to be able to throw it more and have more big plays and more explosives because that only helps your running back. And this is why the tight end is such a big position in college football these days because the tight end allows you to, throw it and run it and do it. It allows for a lot of the versatility. And obviously the Red Raiders have 3 good ones. So, but I'm here for you got to adapt and thrive. Joey said something earlier in the week that I thought was pretty. Hey, how has your coaching staff changed from when you first got here to right now? And he admitted, and I'm trying to remember exactly how he phrased it, but I'm going to get the gist of this is going to be, pretty close. Now I'm not as worried about, I think he goes, we were too worried about if we win and it looks the right way when we first got here. Now We just want to win. We don't care if it's ugly or if you run it or throw it, whatever it may be, or if we get in a shootout, or if we're in a low scoring game, we have to play field position, all that stuff. That part does not matter, which I think he even admitted that it's just maybe too caught up into how it looked, regardless of the result. Like, did it look okay before we got to the result? And I think now they're just not, skip the first part. It's just about the result. And I think that is kind of what Zach is talking about. So much so that I think Joey even mentioned that this is what Pat Mahomes talked to the kids about and the team about on Friday. And I think to sum it up, it was, you find a way. You find a way. Because you'll hear everybody, Mahomes isn't really that big of a stud in fantasy football. He's not leading the NFL in rushing yards from a QB standpoint, or even passing yards as a QB. I mean, that's Josh Allen, that's Anthony Richardson, or Jalen Hurts. You got all these different names. But who is everybody going to take if they are starting an NFL team right now? There is no second choice. Who is everybody, would say is the face of the NFL? And the reason is because he does find a way. And sometimes it's pretty. Sometimes it's underhanded. Sometimes it's behind the back. Sometimes he's not even looking at the guy. Sometimes he's gonna throw an interception and all that. But he figures out the game and gets his team to the end, and they get the result. And I think that's kind of what he was trying to impress upon the team. And I think it's pretty cool that Joey. That's just what he's saying, man. We don't care what it looks like, man. We need to win. Period. Nobody else cares about the rest of it.
Yeah, that got my attention too. I thought that was kind of strange to hear. I really didn't know exactly what he meant. The way you're describing it helps a little bit. Do you think, though, is that just like we want to score so many points thing, or is it we want to be more defensive dominated when we win than not? What do you really think he meant by that? Because I was a little surprised to hear it. First, today's episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list of tasks at work or a bundle of do-it-yourself projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can cover everything with energy to spare. If you're like me, you've always got a lengthy list of things to get done around the house. So when you're getting your supplies for any project, don't forget the most essential one, a 5 Hour Energy shot. 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get in the zone. And that's why 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy and hectic day. And you always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store nationwide. And even better, you can stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. And right now, if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy today, you can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Hurry, because this offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions and does not apply to subscription orders. Boost your day and boost your life and get in the Get It Done zone by going to 5hourenergy.com today. Honestly, for a guy that's been in the business for so long, I'm sure been through all variety of football games, I was a little surprised to hear it.
I think when you come in as the head coach here, there's probably a level of pressure, the way that the offense is supposed to look. I mean, Mike cast a big shadow.
Sure.
You just mentioned when you started the show, offense is the deal and people pay attention. Well, I mean, there's a standard, and then Joey's a defensive guy and he preaches takeaways and he preaches pressure on the QB and all these things. And so maybe you get caught up in a lot of the superficial things, like, did we get our turnovers? Did we get our sacks? Did we score the 30 plus points we wanted to? Did we get everybody fed where we were throwing for 300 and running for 300? I mean, whatever. Pick your numbers or statistical categories. And I think that at this point, and I'm speculating, but at this point, I think that he's basically saying, yeah, you can wipe all of that off the table. We just need to, and he may have been worried about, with all the analytics talk, how how good does that look at the end of the day? Am I gonna get asked a bunch about going, 1 for 6 on fourth down? And why did you go for it here? Whereas if you go 1 for 6 on fourth down and you win the game, nobody's gonna care, just as long as you won, right? And so
Right.
I think that's probably part of the dynamic. I'm probably putting words in there, and
Well,
I'm
I'm
just
asking you to speculate just for your perspective.
yeah, but I'd be willing to bet you that some of that factors in
Yeah.
on and now you've recruited really well via the portal and in high school, and now there's going to be this is what Zach is gonna and Joey too and Barron, and you're gonna have to like literally have some tough conversations with kids and be like, hey man, I'm sorry you didn't catch but like 2 passes today. Suck it up. This is what the team needed. Do you think Taj will care if he only carries it 16 times versus 25? If the 16 carry game was a win and the 25 carry game was a loss,
Right.
He's not going to care. So there's going to be some of that aspect too, because you're paying athletes, you've recruited athletes under the guise of a certain role that they may fill, and so that there's those layers too that maybe you didn't have previously as well. But just win, baby. Al Davis,
That's
R.I.P.
right.
Yeah.
You kind of made me flinch there for a second, just saying you're paying athletes out loud. I'm thinking, wait, what year is it? Oh, wait, never mind. That's okay to say. That's part of what happens.
Just ask Dave Aranda.
That's right. Still takes some getting used to. Well, you were kind of bringing up a modern era and offensive identity, and a lot of the things that you're describing there, obviously, that goes into what a college football program has going on as they get into a season. And I'm glad you mentioned sort of the era aspect, because I was thinking about, as we were listening to some comments from Zach Kittley, one of his answers having to do with, this kind of ties back into the depth chart, I guess, but really it ties, I think, more into sort of a bit of a raised eyebrow when it came to Caleb Douglas being slotted on a depth chart on the inside. And so it kind of was a question probably more so like, hey, inside or outside, how long has he been working there? Where's he at? The gist of the conversation, though, as Coach Kittley turned it toward, though, Chris, was the fact that guys are going to be moved around. And I'm kind of thinking about this positionless, among some skill players at least, type of athlete that's out there and maybe only growing in some number. I know some guys' measurables, and we had this conversation about Micah Hudson, some guys' measurables kind of angle them more towards a certain spot on the field, obviously. But it really sounds like these guys are going to be moved around quite a bit, and maybe more than we've seen. What'd you make of that?
Josh Kelly, Dre McCray maybe, and then Micah Hudson I think will be moved. This is what you're talking about, right? Just kind of moved in a variety, inside, outside, maybe even in the backfield,
Yeah.
Kind of Swiss Army stuff. And I would offer this up if people are tuning in or they're going to watch this game on Saturday, whether it be via television or be in the stadium. Be careful about your expectations for Micah Hudson just immediately, because one, the game is hard. I saw some research the other day that I thought this is worth pointing out. I don't remember exactly the years, but this is in the last 5 to 10 years. And this includes a variety of players that are now in the NFL, like CeeDee Lamb. I'm trying to remember some of the other names that were on here. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, the USC receiver that now plays for the Lions. There was a bunch of names, and I was like, man, I recognized a bunch of these guys. The research was this. 5-star receivers, and I think it's like the last 5 to 10 years, about 12% of them have over 300 yards during their first season. But so what I'm saying is, like, the majority don't really do a ton right out of the gate. Now, there's some exceptions. I mean, that's the reason that the percentage is 12 and not 100 or 0 in this case. But so my point is, some of these NFL guys triggered with some of this study too, in that it's just hard. And it's not till year 2 or 3 before and then it doesn't mean they're not talented. It doesn't mean they're not going to be an NFL guy, because I recognize plenty of these guys. I'm just saying, right out of the gate, he would be very much the exception as a 5-star receiver that just popped for 1,000 yards or something. So if he catches 3 or 4 passes every Saturday, it's okay. Like, nobody needs to freak out because thankfully, you have really quality people ahead of him or around him right now. And there's the reason that he's not listed as a starter. Because I saw some people when the depth chart came out, he's not even starting. Well, in a way, that's a good thing. Because I think Caleb and Coy and Dre and Josh, those guys have earned it, and they're old heads in some ways, except for Coy. But I think that's I just wanted to throw that out there a little bit so people don't get like misrepresented on kind of what they're expecting to see. I mean, he's not going to go out there and be Randy Moss from day one. Cut the kid some slack and let's see what it looks like. Having said all that, maybe he'll catch 153 yards of passes on Saturday, and everybody will come back and go, "Level, you're an idiot." He's part of the 12%, and I to which I will say, I sit corrected. But we'll just see. But you have some position flex with those guys to your point, Cowan, with Josh, Dre, and I think Micah Hudson, and I think that Zach will try to use that as much as possible.
Yeah, I was going to say, whatever we don't see out of Hudson, it doesn't sound like it would be for lack of trying from an OC standpoint to get the ball in his hands among some of those others that you're referencing there. But it's really interesting to see a guy like Hudson in this kind of spotlight because it's unique, I think, unto himself for the most part. There have been some recruits that fans are excited about before. A lot of those fans, the ones that really pay close attention to recruiting, but I think this guy is obviously spilled beyond that radar. And there are plenty of so-called casual Red Raiders out there that probably have an idea of who Micah Hudson is. So it's a unique spot to say the least. And yeah, cautioning expectations is great. But if you would like to be Randy Moss week 1, we're not limiting you. So go ahead and go on and do that if you got an interest. But yeah, I think some cautious optimism is obviously best in most situations. And as we've talked about, we do consider it to be a luxury of sorts that you've got a guy so talented and so heralded coming in at the same time that you've got one of the most proven and seasoned pass catchers in the NCAA coming to your building as well. So Josh Kelly is a luxury in addition to some of those other guys that have got some more veteran experience that will be around him. But we'll be ready when he decides to come on. We'll be ready. There's no question about that sooner or later.
And I'm not saying he's not ready. I saw this research and I was like, man, that's pretty significant data.
Yeah.
That there's like a true freshman quarterback that's going to play for Nebraska that was extremely highly touted, Dominic Raiola, and there's some other stud freshmen that come in every year. It's just I think my point of bringing all that up is there's some historical data that suggests that it's unlikely just to trigger immediately. It takes a bit of time, but part of that is the game is hard, man. And every team these days is old. There's just not a lot of young football teams anymore because everybody's gone out and sucked up a bunch of older guys and guys that have been in programs and in the weight room for 2 or 3 years from the portal, and that's just kind of what you're looking at, including ACU. I mean, ACU's filled up with an Ole Miss guy, an Oklahoma guy, a whole bunch of Texas Tech guys, and on and on and on and on it goes. And so the game is just tough. But I think my point is, too, is luckily you don't need Micah Hudson to be Randy Moss right out of the gate.
Yeah, we're glad to be among those groups that have added some old heads, so to speak, to the roster, right? We've been fishing in that pond just as much as anybody and can't wait to see them out there on Saturday night. Enjoyed the conversation as always, Chris. Appreciate the time and the insights, and we'll be one day closer next time around. So looking forward to it.
Anytime we can say position flex in a show of ours, I feel like we've won. And we got to mention that some too, and we mentioned research. I mean, I just feel like we're doing all the good here. Hey, enjoy your Wednesday, people. We are inching closer before Centennial Champion. I think is that the name of the horse this year? I think am I right there?
I'm not sure, but I can't wait to grade it. The equine grading scale might return this season to Locked On Texas Tech.
Yeah, there you go. But we are inching closer.
I know they're working hard to make a good Locked On Texas Tech equine grading scale. It's on their radar. There's no question about that. All right. Appreciate having us on your radar daily. Thanks to the everydayers mixing it up in the YouTube comments, of course, and get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.